All right. Hello and welcome to our presentation. Our presentation is on General Motors and their incident with their ignition switch. So the main event of what happened was the GM company that was making the cars found out about a flaw with their ignition switches, and they really didn't do anything about it, but it had a lot more, negative impacts than they thought. In the community, accidents started happening, and it actually caused safety features to fail. And people who had bought the cars, some of them started getting hurt, and even quite a few ended up dying. So obviously, the community was mad, and they confronted GM Motors and Mary Berry. And Mary came up with an excuse that she was trying to push forward a recall for the past 10 years, which only brought up the fact that this problem was found 10 years ago. So, problem, as we know, is GM had a design flaw in some of their vehicles. The context is at that point, when the problem first arose, there was no way of knowing if a problem was fatal or not. So there was no reason to push forward the recall. But then the problem shows up is the problem was fatal, and there was times where cars, were failing, and the car was accidentally turning itself off because of the ignition switch. At that point, they should have instantly done the recall, but for some reason they did not. Which brings us to the ethical issues. Mary Berry's CEO should have made a public announcement on this situation the moment the problem arose. So not even like, oh, if it's a one-off. If there's a chance of it happening, she should have done it, especially after the first casualty. And someone working there who knew of the problem should have leaked the situation or warned the public of what was happening before it got into such a bad manner. Because GM didn't do anything about it until someone ended up suing the company.
The actor we chose for this issue was Mary Berry, who was the CEO of General Motors. Her ethical responsibility, if we look at it from her perspective, she should have ensured the product was safe and viewed testing and all the safety before launching it and allowing the company to start selling the product. Instead, she just claimed not to know about the ignition switch recalls, which is really unethical on her part. If we look at the situation through different lenses, the utilitarianism lens always looks for the great amount of good for the greatest amount of people. So if we look at it with that lens, they should have caught the issue from the start. And once they found out, they should have quickly notified the public. In a deontology view, which is knowing what's right and wrong, you should already know, like you're taught this from a young age, that lying is wrong. So telling your consumers that you have airbags when they're not fully functional is wrong. And if there's a malfunction, you should notify, like the one of the workers or engineers should have notified the higher up, being like, this isn't working. So they should have made fixed it, but instead they just sold the product. In the virtue ethics, you need to have a moral character. So morally, you should provide safety for all your consumers who buy your product, and you should let them know about the defects once they're detected and not release the product.
Okay, and the manufacturing of ignition switches has been started in 2001, while Mary Bear, the CEO of GM, has apologized in front of the Congress on 2014, and they had asked for a recall of 1,800,000 vehicles. This 13 years wait was an unacceptable excuse, which caused many people death and collisions and harm. This had resulted broken trust of many customers and resulted them 3 million drop of the GM stock price market. What instead they could do is they could start an investigation on the very first days of manufacturing, because in the 2001, the ignition switches has caused 2 deaths, which could be prevented through a proper research. And if they could have investigated the problem and asked for recall, to recall the ignition switches rather than the whole car, this would cause them much less damage, and probably more contract would be kept rather than waiting for 13 years and recalling 1,800,000 cars. The pros and cons for this solution could be counted. The pros could be probably after announcing this problem, their stock market would keep increasing as they were increasing, and they would have a better market. Also, none of the automobile manufacturer companies would cancel their contract with them because of the trust issue. Also, the company would keep their reputation and trustworthy because of not hiding a problem. They just released the problem because they got forced to after 13 years. So this is a huge problem. The cons with this solution is their general sale may have decreased by some percentage. Also, some customer may never have taken the vehicles to change the ignition switches, and as a result, it would cause more death. So, but from our point of view, this solution would be much ethical and more in terms of people's life, it would be much more trustworthy rather than waiting for 13 years and causing a lot of people's death and asking for recall. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you.